Hey, the Comics Kid 2099 here, and I have a graphic novel that I want to talk to you guys about. Magneto, Volume 1, Infamous. This is written by Cullen Bunn and has artwork by a few different people who I have never heard of. Let me see here. The artists, Gabriel Hernandez Walta and Javier Fernandez. So you've got Fernandez and Hernandez, or Walta as he's going by here. And I've never heard of either of those artists, but they're both really good. And to be honest, when I was reading this book, I never actually noticed a noticeable change in the artwork. So their styles are similar enough that I didn't notice, hey, we've got a different artist in this issue. But there's a couple of issues that are done by a different artist. Let's see here. Walta did 1, 2, and 3, and 5, and Fernandez did 4 and 6. So I didn't really notice the artist change in those issues. So they're both really good, and they're both very similar. So if you're the kind of person who you pick up a trade paperback and there's a different artist halfway in, and that always takes you out, that happens to me sometimes, that's not a problem here, even though you've got multiple artists working on this book. So, a little bit of backstory for this thing. Number one, I am a huge fan of Cullen Bunn. The Sixth Gun, I've been saying for a very long time, is my favorite ongoing series going on. I don't know if it's still going on because I'm way behind, and I had only been reading it in the trades, and I'm at least 2 trades behind. So I don't know if that series is still going on or not, but that series is one of the best things coming out of comic books in general right now, and if you haven't read The Sixth Gun from Oni Press, go read it right now. So Cullen Bunn is writing this, and that was one thing in his favor, if you will. However, I did not like Spider-Man Season 1, which I reviewed probably over a year ago, and that was a situation where I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. Even though that book wasn't very good in my opinion, I really felt like it wasn't his fault, and I really felt like if he was allowed to do a series where he wasn't being hampered by editorial to do X, Y, and Z that he didn't want to do, then the series would be a lot better. Such as The Sixth Gun, where he's not really being hampered by editorial and he can do his own thing. And then we get this series, which is, in my opinion, pretty darn good. It's not really, it's definitely a lot better than the Spider-Man Season 1 book. I'm not sure if it's better than The Sixth Gun or not. It's two different things, apples and oranges, and you really can't compare the two because they're both trying to do different things. For example, this series is dealing with a corporate-owned character, and so there's different rules that you have to play by when you're playing with a corporate-owned character. And the premise to this series is basically Magneto is now, he's distancing himself away from the X-Men, but he's not going back to being a full-on villain. In the 1980s, Magneto had joined the X-Men, and then through a series of events, basically he was like, well, I have to do what I think is best to protect mutant kind, so that means I have to leave the X-Men, and that basically meant it was like turning on a light switch. It's like, okay, he's back to being a bad guy now. And I always hated that. I always wished that he had stayed with the X-Men. I never liked that he went back to being a villain in the 1990s. And when I heard that this was going on, I was really afraid that they were going to take Magneto back to being a villain. And for all I know, maybe they are. Maybe this series is going to lead into him being the big enemy of the X-Men once again. I don't know. But right now, he's not really full-on villain yet. He's doing things that the government considers to be very villainous, but he himself is not at that place just yet. He's kind of in between, I'm an ally of the X-Men and I'm the leader of the Brotherhood of Mutants. He's kind of about halfway in between. And that's a very interesting place to put him, because usually this character, he's either one extreme or the other. He's really not playing in the middle very often that I've seen him. And this is a character, Magneto, who I really like. I've always liked Magneto pretty much since I started reading comics, since I started becoming familiar with the X-Men. Not before the movie. I never really had any thoughts on him before the movie, but when the movie came out and that opening scene of the first X-Men movie, that really made me interested in the character. And this is a very good story. I'm just going to say that. There is one thing I don't understand. And first of all, I should go ahead and mention, as I said in my review of the Wolverine and the X-Men volume earlier this week, I have absolutely no desire to read Avengers vs. X-Men. It is just something that everything I've seen about it looks abundantly awful, and this series is kind of sort of, it's not spinning out of the events of that, because he's been a member of Cyclops' Weapon X-Men for a little while now, but then he distances himself from that team, and I get the feeling that Avengers vs. X-Men provides a little bit of backstory for this, or at least the books that spun out of Avengers vs. X-Men were providing the backstory for this. I really don't know, but there's some things that are happening that I don't understand. For example, Magneto is basically he's going around, and when he sees injustices done to mutants, he is going to use his powers to fix these wrongs as he sees them. And I've heard some people say it's kind of like the Dexter TV series, but with mutant powers, and I would say that's a pretty good way of explaining it. Although I've never seen Dexter, it's kind of along those lines. He's a vigilante, and the world thinks that he's bad, but he's operating on his own moral code. And that's kind of consistent with Magneto, because once we got to the point where Magneto's backstory as a survivor of the Holocaust was set in place, that kind of made Magneto much more of a sympathetic villain. He was still doing things that were kind of villainous, but in his mind, he was doing things that he felt were right, and he felt this was the only way to deal with the world as he sees the world. And in this book, he is still treated as a villain. You've got this group of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. They are chasing him down, and in a lot of ways, it kind of reminds me of the Incredible Hulk TV series, where the Incredible Hulk is over here, and then you've got that reporter, Jack McGee, who's like 1 or 2 days behind him, but he's always just one step behind him. It's kind of like that here, where Magneto, whatever he did in issue 1, in issue 2, those S.H.I.E.L.D. reporters, or I keep saying reporters, those S.H.I.E.L.D. agents are there trying to figure out where is he going to be next. And they are like, okay, Magneto is dangerous. He's a terrorist and we have to take him down. And I was reading this and I was thinking, okay, but why? Why is he so dangerous? Because everything that Magneto does here, there is another character in the Marvel Universe who does stuff kind of similar. And it's not the Punisher. You might be thinking, oh, it's kind of like the Punisher but with superpowers. Maybe it is, I don't know. Wolverine, okay? What is so different about Magneto and Wolverine? There have been oodles of comics where Wolverine is killing mad scientists, crazy supervillains, or cultists, or organic sentinels. There have been all kinds of comics where Wolverine is killing people for the greater good, and he is an Avenger. He is friends with the government, at least as far as Nick Fury. He's friends with Nick Fury and has done stuff with Fury before. He is an X-Man. He's the headmaster of his own school. Why is it okay for Wolverine to do those things, but then when Magneto does stuff that's very similar to that, the government is hunting him down and considers him a terrorist? I don't really understand that. It's very inconsistent with the rest of the Marvel Universe. And I feel like that's just a situation of, if this was a creator-owned series that did not deal with a corporate-owned character who has 40, 50 years of backstory of being a villain behind him, I feel like if this was just a brand new character and a brand new series, maybe that wouldn't be as much of a prominent aspect of this series, the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents chasing him down. I don't really know, but in the Marvel Universe, it really feels kind of hypocritical that Wolverine can go out and he can kill all these bad guys who are doing very bad things. But then when Magneto goes out and he kills bad guys who are doing very bad things, then the government is like, oh, red flags all over the place. We've got to go stop Magneto from doing that. It's really weird. It's really strange that they don't even address that. I feel like I wouldn't have this issue if in this book someone mentioned that and they said, hey, why are we hunting down this guy? If they just explain that, I think that would be a lot better. It would kind of ease some of my problems with this book. And really, I don't have a lot of problems with this book. I really enjoyed it, and I cannot wait to read Volume 2. I cannot wait. This is what I said about The Sixth Gun. I cannot wait. When this series is over, I will read the whole thing through. It's going to be really great, I think, and I really think that when this whole thing is done, it's going to be looked at as one of the better X-Men runs over the last 15 years at least. It's not an actual X-Men series, it's a solo series, but still, it's very good, and I cannot imagine any reason why it would get any worse unless another big, huge event kind of comes in and has to shake things up, and then Cullen Bunn is forced to deal with the events of that event. I know that this series is tying in with Axis, and that's a series that I'm not really interested in reading. It doesn't look very appealing to me. I'm really afraid that that series might kind of try and ruin what's going on here with Cullen Bunn's run. But so far, I'm really enjoying this, and I'm also really glad that this series is actually going on for a while. This would have been not nearly as good if it got canceled with issue 3 or something like that. But he's setting up a lot of really long-term plot points in this volume, and I have no idea when he's going to get around to paying those off. It may be volume 2, it may be even later on down the line. But if this series got canceled with issue 3 or 4, you would have had some of those plot points that he was setting up that never would have gotten the chance to play out in the way that he wanted them to. And I'm really glad that it appears the series is very successful, and it looks like he's going to be able to do whatever he wants in terms of letting this story play out organically and not having to end things too soon because the series gets canceled or something like that. So I highly recommend that you guys pick up this series. It's got a very interesting premise. The art is gorgeous. The writing is incredibly tight. I really enjoy what Cullen Bunn is doing here, and this restores my faith in him as a writer, and it really assures me that Spider-Man Season 1 was just a fluke and that everything else he does is just gold. And this also makes me certain that when the Sinestro Volume 1 comes out, which is also written by Cullen Bunn, I am pretty sure I'm going to go pick that up. I wasn't so certain. I had heard some people say that while this series was pretty good, that Sinestro was not as good, and I definitely don't like Green Lantern, and I'm really not a big fan of the New 52 as a whole, but Sinestro by Cullen Bunn, and it looks like it might kind of sort of be the same thing that this is, where it's a villain who's not really a villain and not really a hero. I'm very interested in seeing what that is going to be like. So whenever that volume comes out, I will be reading Sinestro Volume 1 by Cullen Bunn, thanks to this book being so good. So that's all I have to say here. I hope that you guys like this review. I hope that I was able to convince you to go pick this up because it's good and you should pick it up. And if you did like this video, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I will be doing a review of an episode of Batman Beyond in a couple of days. And that's all I have for this week other than that. So I hope that you guys have a great rest of the week, and I will see you next week. Until then, have a great day.